present, generally 20 to 23 minutes, somewhere in 20 to 25 minutes, roughly in that range. When Will's finished, we will take essentially a few questions from each of the committee members if they want to ask them. And then once they have asked their questions, depending on time, we may have time for a question or two from people who are not on the committee. But once we finish that, we'll wrap up the Zoom. Everybody that's in the room, not the three of us, will be kind of excused from this, and we will talk about scoring for Will. Will will be outside the room. We'll call Will back and let him know kind of the results of the comprehensive exam. So I'm going to turn it over to Will at this time so that he can go ahead and get started. So.
Yeah, so I just want to thank all my friends, family, colleagues, and classmates. And I'm Will Freed, and I'm just going to be giving a presentation about my So my background of myself, just before coming to Fort Hays State University, I came in the fall 2020 semester into the HESA program at Fort Hays State University, which is our higher education and student affairs master's program, all the way from the East Coast, Bethesda, Maryland, which was a change for me, which I have dearly enjoyed. And before I became a student in this master's program, I had some undergraduate experience from my time as an undergrad student at Salisbury University. And this involved working in the intramural program at Salisbury University for 4 years, where my first 2 years, I was just an intramural referee, where I was learning to officiate a lot of basketball and flag football mainly. And then my junior year in the intramural program at Salisbury University, I became an intramural supervisor, where I was involved in training and assessing a lot of new officials and being more of a head lead official for my colleagues, along with working my final 3 years at Salisbury University in the Office of Admissions as a university host, where I was helping involved planning and being at new student admitted students day events, open houses, helping greet prospective students and families and getting them to enjoy the experience at Salisbury University, along with being heavily involved as a student activist and advocate for doing disability advocacy work throughout my 4 years at Salisbury University, which led to me here in this picture with myself and my colleagues during the 2018-2019 school year, receiving the President's Diversity Award at Salisbury University for my disability advocacy work and pushing disability inclusion forward. And here, this is a picture of my mentor and some of Candace Henry and some of my other disability advocacy colleagues on doing a panel on classroom accommodations at the college level for students with disabilities. And my first year of college at Salisbury University in the intramural program, coming in as the referee of the year for the intramural program with my enthusiasm for officiating and pushing myself forward. So before I came to Fort Hays State University in the fall of 2020 semester, I had some goals and people that I wanted to build off. And the one name that always came to my mind right before I came here was the name of Ed Roberts from California, who was a student in the Disabled Students Program at the University of California, which is mainly a physically disabled students program, which pushed accessibility forward for the greater of others and pushed accessibility on their campus. And this was some of the work that I wanted to build off with, working with students with disabilities at the college level to ensure that they're meeting their access needs and ensuring that they have the best accessibility forward. And this work of Ed Roberts had me come in with a very ambitious attitude, because I wanted to push disability inclusion forward right away. And I had to learn that I had to take my time and I couldn't always take action immediately. I had to learn my ropes and learn the role that I wanted to do, which was very important and essential for me. Now I'm just going to talk about a few of the different roles that I had during grad school here at Fort Hays State University. My first role was my graduate assistantship in the Student Accessibility Services Office, which I had during my entire 2 years and still work in at Fort Hays State University. I learned so many things during this role to help me from a long run in my career. And one of my first things was learning about writing accommodation letters for students with disabilities, undergrad, grad, and some non-traditional students, because I came from receiving letters of accommodations as an undergrad student at Salisbury University and didn't know what the process was going through that. And this was a great learning curve for me. I also got to speak with a lot of professors on ensuring that students would be getting disability accommodations and how they would understand and ask questions to push disability inclusion throughout the college classroom. And I had to change my gears a little bit because I came from being a student activist, which is very different, to becoming a disability service provider at the college level, which involved thinking of my attitudes and how I would change them to see that I'm more professional and here to listen and hear both sides of things. And during my time in this role, I got to help so many students with disabilities become more independent by ensuring that they knew how to schedule exams and learning how to advocate for themselves, take care of their own initiatives, and understand with their transitions that you have to think and self-advocate for yourself, not in college, but in the long run. And one of my most favorite opportunities that I had during my time as a grad assistant here in Student Accessibility Services was getting to be involved with a few panels and events. One of my favorite events that I got to do this past fall 2020 semester as the grad assistant was creating a sidewalk chalk event about what disability inclusion means and how it is positive for others, and seeing how individuals on the campus community can think about disability inclusion and positive messages forward. I also got to help plan with my colleagues in our Office of Student Engagement an International Day for Persons with Disabilities event at the beginning of December to showcase that disability rights is human rights. And I got to look at collaboration and understanding others, which was great for me, and sharing my knowledge with disability inclusion with the rest of the campus community. My biggest learning experience from being a graduate assistant in the Student Accessibility Services Office was thinking more about self-care, about myself, which my colleagues told me, and this was controlling what I would do outside of the office and lessening my disability advocacy work to ensure that I have time and ensure that I can do the best thing forward for the students that I serve, and find time to more relax with myself, because I had to look at how my attitude, my perception on how it was with other people, and learned how to take steps in saying no to other disability advocacy work outside of the office for the first time in my life, which was very hard for me. And I had to think about sustainability for right now and in the long run. Now I'm going to dive into some of my practicum opportunities. So my first practicum that I'm going to talk about was this past summer of 2020-21. I got to intern for one of my mentors, Jonathan Lidges, remotely for the University of Missouri St. Louis Succeed program, which is one of our transition to post-secondary education programs for young adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities in our country. And this was a great opportunity that I had, because one of the great things that I got to do was getting myself into facilitating trainings, being involved in trainings with other departments. And one of the departments that I worked with doing a training was with my colleagues, was with the Office of New Student Programs, which was training our orientation leaders at University of Missouri St. Louis about disability inclusion. And I enjoyed being part of a community of other colleagues that had a passion about doing with that. I also got to create my own training materials and presentations for the University of Missouri St. Louis Succeed program summer camps that I got to do by training their camp volunteers about disability laws and ways to think about disability inclusion. Put me in a passion that I can be doing this and understand about this for the long run. A great opportunity that I had was to help co-facilitate our new student person-centered planning meetings, which I got to use my advising skills by helping new incoming freshmen into the Succeed program by listening to past life experience along with their parent perspectives and hearing both sides to come in with effective plans for the students coming into their first semester, ensure that they have a smooth transition into college life, which is very different for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, because at times they grow up with always being around their parents, and it's important to foster independence and growth with everyone around them. I also got to test my skills with using my recruiting and development by working on creating a brochure to get volunteers involved with the Succeed program. And one thing that the Succeed program does is that they have a lot of volunteers from their college of education that are a lot of education major students, because they're eventually going to work in the classroom with students with disabilities. And we use this opportunity to help them gain skills that they would need to as educators. And it was important for me creating an effective strategy, which I learned that I can do for the long run. My biggest learning experience from this was always about needing to just trust myself that I can lead and create things on my own and not always need someone to hold my hand. And this was a big growth and show that I was able to create from the first week with doing research on universal design for learning, which my colleagues in the Succeed program wanted me to do. And my colleagues in the Succeed program showed that they had a lot of trust in me and appreciated the push for disability inclusion that I did for them every day, which was very important. My second practicum that I'm going to talk about was this past fall 2021 semester. I had an opportunity to intern remotely for Natasha Harris with the University of Kentucky intramural program. And this was a great opportunity for me to apply a lot of my knowledge of student development theory, which I looked at using student involvement theory into seeing how our new student employees wanted to get involved and that how it could be assessed. And this showed that you have to put a lot of theories into practice as a practitioner and not always just learning them in the classroom. You have to take them into what you want to do and grow with others. The one big takeaway that I had from this opportunity was learning to challenge myself, push myself to be stronger, to serve the students and have a lot of purpose of what I do. And one of the things that Natasha Harris built her program this year is what is the purpose of your job, that how we do and what we do, which helped me for the long run working with college students on university campuses. I'm going to continue using that with finding what my purpose is, along with just having opportunities to develop professional development sessions independently on my own. And Natasha Harris having the trust, and I created a professional development session for student employees on finding your own leadership style, which can transfer anything into life which you want to do outside of working in intramural sports. My biggest learning experience, just some comments that Natasha Harris told me, was reflecting on my time with interning with her program, is that your addition to our program kept us on a path of learning development and just being better. Considering all the changes this semester, you helped to keep us grounded, and that was just needed as we were all going into a new normal this fall semester. Her staff appreciated what I brought and exposed them to, and she appreciated it and is looking forward to continue the work that I provided them, because it can easily be applied to the intramural program, and it all positively impacted our students, and they knew when you presented they were going to learn and be better when they applied what I taught them. And hearing these words of encouragement showed that I can serve any students on a college campus in higher education for the long run of my career. And now I'm going to talk about some goals. So first, I'm going to talk about goals that I need to think about every day and reflect on. The one thing I've learned during my entire time in the higher education and student affairs program is I have to elevate myself every day, think very positive, and ensure that I'm doing that and growing. I always have to find purpose and passion for what I want to do and how it's impacting myself and others. Networking is important and essential. Continue to grow, find purpose when connecting and growing with others. Professional development, investing for myself, continuing webinars, education, finding others that want to do things. Some of my goals for employment, either looking to work for the long run in disability services, intramurals, or academic advising in higher education. The steps for that is next going to work at a coordinator level in any of these roles. And I have to see what experiences I gain in these roles for the next 2 to 5 years to see if I want to be ready and climb up the ladder to be an assistant director, which is the next step. As I go into my first professional role and I taken time to reflect. I need to gain a lot more experience supervising employees with the human resources side, learning and managing budgets for different programs and offices, and being involved with the strategic planning process is essential and important for me to do. And now I'm going to talk and reflect on my strengths and weaknesses of the 10 NASPA competencies. The first one is the personal and ethical foundations competency. One of the things with this competency that I learned during the HESA program in my experiences is taking the time to involve a lot more personal reflection in my work by using strong critical thinking all the time, and using more personal reflection, reflecting from every experience has allowed me to grow as a professional. And one of the things that I used to look at this was look at mental performance coach Brian Kane, who's worked with a lot of athletes and uses a process of well, better, and how. And this means, what are you doing well in your role? What can I do better? And how do I need to get stronger with the work that I do? It has been and helped me positively lift the work that I've been doing. I've also just learned is that I need to calm down when facing things that I don't think are going well in serving students with disabilities. Just don't react quickly. Take the time to process, because of the experiences can impact yourself and others. One of my weaknesses with this is just finding ways to continue to calm myself down when I'm facing ethical dilemmas in the workplace, when there are things that I don't always agree with. Just take more time to reflect. Don't try to run and go away. And it's been a bigger step and grow from when I've started here at Fort Hays State University. Some of the things, especially with personal and ethical foundations, is just lifting yourself up and think about a lot of the accomplishments that I've done, the relationships with colleagues and friendships that have gotten me into the right spot, that have allowed me to get inducted at the end of this month into the Susan and Daniels National Disability Mentoring Hall of Fame for the disability advocacy work that I've done in my lifetime. Here I just have a picture of my alma mater last year naming an outstanding undergraduate advocate award at Salisbury University for the work that I've done. And thinking like a champion every day is essential for myself and others that I serve. For the next competency, I'm going to talk about the values, philosophy, and history competency. And one of the things that I've learned during my entire time in grad school at Fort Hays State University was learning about land acknowledgements and asking my colleagues some questions about that to figure out a history of institution. And the one weakness about it is that I haven't had much experience writing them. I need to use my critical thinking and to do a lot of my own research to connect with others and think about the importance and process for writing a land acknowledgement, to understand the history, land of institutions around you. A big thing that I've learned is the passion and sustainability of institutions of higher education by deeply understanding their purpose, values, philosophy, and history of what I'm working with, and what is the mission and vision of the departments with the institutions and how they were built have been essential for me to grow. For the assessment, evaluation, and research competency, one of the things that I've learned is the importance of collecting data for the department, which I did when I was interning for my practicum this summer for the University of Missouri St. Louis Succeed program. I looked at a lot of new enrollment student data and saw the importance of collecting important transition post-secondary education data, which all gets reported to our U.S. Department of Education, depending on the grant and the proper procedures of that. One of the things that I've learned during my entire time in grad school here at Fort Hays State University is thinking about creating categories and strong analysis for literature reviews and the importance of topics and the details has helped me grow my critical thinking skills. One of the things that I always need to do with assessment, evaluation, research, which the critical thinking is always use it all the time, which is going to make myself take my time to process the information and research and not always be in a rush. And there are times where as I reflect, I was probably in a rush and a little too much, and I need to enjoy what I do with that. For the law, policy, and governance competency, one of the things that I have learned is that I understand that a lot of higher education departments and divisions in higher education are governed by a lot of structures and hierarchies, and I need to work within them and not against them. And this is something that I've learned over time, and looking at our roles and responsibilities and the importance of that has been a big growth for me. One of the things with laws that I've always learned since I've come into my role here working in student accessibility services at Fort Hays State Universities. Understand that our office is governed with being a federal public institution by abiding to Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, along with the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, ensuring that we're adhering to those standards because of receiving federal financial aid from our government. A big growth area for me is just looking more into the strategic plan for the long run and seeing how an institution's agenda is and what I want to accomplish and how it can all work together and not going against your own agenda is an important growth area for me. For the organizational and human resource competency, the one thing that I've grown a passion for during my higher education and student affairs master's program and practicums is creating effective trainings and allowing individuals to take time to respond, especially when I was creating the summer camp volunteer training for college students with autism for the volunteers at University of Missouri St. Louis. I put a lot of opportunity for individuals to reflect with their knowledge of disability, with understanding the laws and how they govern, and taking time to see where everyone is at. And that's been a big importance and growth area, and not be there to lay them down in the foot, especially for a lot of my presentations and trainings that I've created for a lot of supervisors with the University of Kentucky intramural program, was to allow a lot of time for people to reflect and not always just straight up lecturing them, and hearing what individuals' thought process is has been growth an important area for me. One thing that I want to continue, but especially with the OHR competency, is engaging in a high-end process of student workers and other employees for the long run, and learning the human resource aspect as I go and grow into my roles in higher education, and challenging myself to try something new and become comfortable with it. For the leadership competency, the leadership style that has always stuck with me since my time of being an undergrad student at Salisbury University is transformational leadership, because it allows for myself to inspire others and develop other leaders around me by seeing how they want to lead and how they grow themselves with others around me. And this goes from a lot of great leaders that I've learned from and listened to the past two and few years, which I'll talk more on the next slide. But a weakness of mine with leadership competency is ensuring the way that I lead others can understand and articulate how I mean, and being clear with the definitions and things that I say, and taking my time to speak and ensure I understand what I'm saying before jumping to conclusions will get other people along me and my colleagues on the right path. And this all leads me to the importance of a leadership quote about do not go where the path may lead, go instead where there is no path, and leave a trail is very important and essential for developing other leaders and myself around me. And some of the important leaders that have impacted me during my grad school time starts with Natasha Harris, who I interned for at the University of Kentucky intramural program, because she gave me a passion to grow my passion for student development and implementing that into a program, and showing the trust that I can create effective professional development trainings for people around me, which I want to grow. Ed Rush, who's someone that I've met through basketball officiating through Court Club Elite, which is a basketball officiating year-round membership training organization, has told me you have to come in with a plan for what you do. And this taught me with whatever I do the importance of creating a plan for yourself and stick with that plan, and creating an elite mindset for yourself to be around others. Jonathan Ligis, who I've interned for with the University of Missouri St. Louis Succeed program, told me about how you have to be comfortable, have the uncomfortable conversations with your colleagues around him and myself. And when I was interning for him, I always had the open sense to have those uncomfortable conversations about different topics and views related to disability inclusion from multiple sides, and I've learned to not hurt someone. And this developed my passion this year, especially at Fort Hays State University, being open and having some more difficult conversations from others. JP Nervin, who's the founder of Thrive On Challenge, which is a transformational leadership consulting company for coaches, who I met during the summer of 2017 while working as a basketball official at Coach Wooten's basketball camp in Maryland first introduced me to transformational leadership. And that's what impacted me and defined that I am a transformational leader to these days. Candace Henry, who is a disability service provider of mine at Salisbury University and is still a mentor of mine, who's the current Disability Resource Center director at Salisbury University, taught me and told me that you're a disability advocate, and I had to believe that for my strong advocacy work that I can do for people with disabilities and ensure that I'm in that for the long run. My colleague and mentor, Dr. Patricia Levy, who's a professor in our Department of Social Work at Fort Hays State University, told me and taught me that when I'm serving students with disabilities and all students, seeing where my students are at first and getting to know them before making some decisions and jumping to inclusions has impacted me, along with her teaching the importance of critical incidents planning as a leader and getting me to have a deeper passion for diversity, equity, and inclusion has been important. For the social justice and inclusion competency, I came into the HESA program at Fort Hays State University with more black and white thinking for only having a passion about disability inclusion. And I need to understand that I needed to grow in these areas. And one of the things was understanding how microaggressions exist for multiple identity groups of people and understanding that there's steps and not responding to them right away, to think about them, reflect, and see if you want to provide resources to them to help me to grow that microaggressions exist. And it's the importance of my education on this. I also need to be very intentional when I'm doing a lot of diversity, equity, inclusion work by taking the time to think about myself, the impact, and what is my purpose in the role. The one thing that I'm always passionate is about a lot of disability advocacy concepts in court cases and events, and I can go into a deep passion on this. And one thing I learned that I need to continue to grow is break it down more easily in user-friendly language for people that have not heard about these things before and are learning them for the first time. With my commitment to social justice and inclusion, I acknowledge my privilege as well as being a white cisgendered male. I have lots of ongoing education, webinars, and opportunities that I need to attend on multiple social justice topics. I need to do my own research and conducting my own professional development sessions for my colleagues. I need to be open to having more uncomfortable conversations with people around me and my colleagues and be comfortable with that as well. For the student development learning competency, I came into the HESA program at Fort Hays State University with a passion for student development theory because of the CRIP theory work of Dr. Elisa Avis, who's one of our leading student development theory scholars who talks about student disability identity development. And this led me into a big ambition of trying to put CRIP theory and other student development theories into practice. And I first learned about this in the fall 2020 semester from my colleague, Dr. Taylor Criley, who's an assistant vice president of student affairs at Fort Hays State University, to talk about the importance of how you need to put student development theory into practice and learn the importance about that. And this is going to help you in the long run. With my strengths with this, now with my experiences, I have learned the importance and have had so many opportunities to put student development theory into practice. When I was with the University of Kentucky, I used experiential learning theory into an assessment for basketball officials returning in the intramural program to officiating basketball for the first time to see how they can grow each game and reflect on their own experiences and how others reflect and seeing what growth areas there are for them, which was very important to understand, along with the importance of self-determination can be used to think of where others want to go and take action, have all led me to the path of I'm passionate about student development for all students that I serve. A weakness of mine is learning to be uncomfortable incorporating more theories, which I haven't used, and continue my research and readings. An example, trying to use the 7 vectors of Chickering and Razor into assessment and reading more deeply about it and how it can impact the program that I create. With the technology competency, my passion for technology comes from attending in the spring of 2021 semester the Multiple Perspectives Society for Disability Studies conference from Ohio State University, where I got to learn about the importance of universal design in higher education technology from Dr. Cheryl Burgstaller, who's the director of the IT Accessibility Division at the University of Washington. And one of the strengths that I've learned is the importance of how you have to use universal design, understand that there's accessible technology practices that exist, such as the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which are built off Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act for technology accessibility, and looking at writing more image descriptions to be on social media platforms that you create to be more accessible for people that are blind and visually impaired. I also need to continue as a weakness of mine to use and adapt to technology platforms and databases and offices, and ensuring that I'm going to have to troubleshoot minimal things to people that are below me and become comfortable doing that for the long run. And for my last competency, which is the advising and supporting competency. When I'm advising students, I just always need to continue using active listening and listening to them while I work with them, because listening is the most important skill for me to have. I need to understand that the students I advise may have a different agenda of myself, and putting them to continue to use that active listening by putting them forward and being very proactive with what they want to do. And it's important for me as well to understand what my role is and what my students need from me. And the one quote that I want to end for you all to leave you off with here is a quote by disability rights activist Ed Roberts about, we just have to go out there and change the old attitudes for all the work we do. Thank you all, and I have questions time here.
Okay, so as I mentioned before, what we will do, there's 3 committee members, and so those 3 will continue to ask Will a couple questions. I'll use the camera and audio from my computer for that. But if you all would like to congratulate Will or talk about that, you're certainly welcome to post in chat if you're on Zoom. And time pending, we may have time for a question or 2 from the floor, so to speak. But I'll turn it over to Dr. Clouch first. If you have any questions or comments that you would like to share with Will or ask him.
Thank you all for your presentation. As not everyone knows, as an ABP for Student Life, I'm also the Title IX officer and senior diversity officer. So my questions will come from the aspect of diversity. And since we've had the time to meet, and I've learned more from you about, as you say, disability awareness. We use accessibility services here. When you look at it, accessibility services or disability awareness, we know that there are different identities and intersections that folks have. So while you have identified as a white cisgender male, tell me what you may have learned about folks that do not identify as you as a white cisgender male, who have different abilities that you are advocating for, and you can tell me what that looks like.
So the one thing that I've done during my research, especially doing disability advocacy work and being here at Fort Hays State University, was adjusting to a framework called the Disability Justice Framework, which is used for more minorities, people that are LGBTQ, people of color, have more mental illness, and how they don't always have the same opportunities as others because of the access to resources, and seeing that you can't always look at our laws and policies with the Americans with Disabilities Act, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, and you have to look at each more person and look more at what is called the collective access principle of disability justice, where you have to see what their needs are and how their accommodations may be different. More than extended time, they might need more access stuff or more stuff on their back for comfort, for chronic pain, and ensuring that you have to deeply listen to them and not always be with the stigma, because especially if you look at our disability rights movement, it was built more off of white, physically disabled people, and you have to learn and acknowledge that our disability justice movement didn't come to the early 2005s, and it leads to others being more oppressed, and you can't have that when you're around people.
Thank you. My other question, in your presentation, and I believe in your information you shared with us, you noted that on a couple of different occasions, you need to listen and better understand where people currently are to help them move forward and what I call find their level of success. If you could give an example, not using names, of how you, now that you've learned that, how have you been able to make that adjustment? And you may have learned this more in your first year or your second year, but provide an example where you've made that adjustment to not just jump to this is what we should do, but hearing and listening to the person.
I think one of the biggest things that I have seen, especially when I've taken phone calls from students with disabilities being registered, like with our offices, is understanding and not like jumping to conclusions right away, just taking my time to hear them out and understand what they need, and as well learn if they need something with an email, needing access to our resources, if they need me to email how to register with our office, and just taking some time to think about that, because your first interaction with the students and where they are at with what their needs can help with recruitment and retention of these students and understanding the impact which they have on you. And that's taken some time for me to process, but also understanding the importance of my role in being there and hearing them.
And my last question, you listed 6 individuals. I'm trying to find my notes here. And one of those was our own Dr. Patricia Levy, excuse me. The advice that Patricia shared with you, what is the one thing that you will be able to take forward after you graduate with our program and step into your first role? What would be that one thing?
I think it's being very strategic with what you want to take. We're doing diversity, equity, inclusion work. You have to take time to brainstorm with what initiatives you want to do, for being very intentional, because she shared with me some of her experience and some of her action items, but you have to also learn what is going to fit with your institution and your colleagues around you, and what is the right time to have the right conversations about this, and are these people ready? As well, also you have to listen and develop trust with them when you want to have topics and discussions related to diversity, equity, inclusion.
All right, moving on to Dr. Kenton Olaf.
Will, I think I told you one time that I was on Dr. Levy's dissertation committee and she was on mine.
Yes.
We were both students at the time. We were the student people on the committees. We've had conversations about Dr. Levy. Well, as always, Dr. Clouch has taken one of my questions about active listening. I teach clinical mental health counseling, so mine will come from that side of things. Will, there's no doubt you're passionate. I knew that from the first day I met you on this campus. One thing you commented on, and I just want to comment on it. I'm glad you're learning to take care of yourself as well as others, because that's really important. You know, you can still be passionate and take care of yourself. And so I appreciate you doing that. My question is, what one area would you say you've grown in the most during your time in the HESA program? And that may not be a fair question because I'm sure there's several, but just pick one.
I think I have learned about the importance of understanding what student development theories you use into theory and practice, and incorporating different assessments. And one of the things which I consider a student development theory is universal design for learning. And that is something that I learned in undergrad at Salisbury University, and hearing and having conversations from Dr. Dean Ravizza, who's an adapted physical education professor there, and getting the first time to get my feet wet in giving trainings with that, and understanding that I have a passion for learning about helping people use different learning strategies, and understanding that it all has to be individualized. And I can really see that now, being the real world being more a reality, and now it has pushed others, and especially during my time at Fort Hays State University, this has led, especially with one of my colleagues, Amy Schmierbach, who's one of our art professors, who's heading a new intellectual developmental disability program group, acknowledging that she needs to learn and do more research about implementing universal design for learning into our own classroom, and that you never know about what impact you're going to have with that.
I think you mentioned, I just have another quick comment question. You talked about ethical dilemmas and how you kind of need to, I don't know if you use the word calm, stay calm, but try to figure out, what's going on. And I just want to comment that Viktor Frankl was an Austrian psychiatrist who was actually interned at Auschwitz during World War II. And he has made the comment, between stimulus and response, there's a space. And that's exactly what you were talking about. It's what you do with that space. It's kind of like the active listening. What we do with that space before we respond is really important. And I was glad to hear you say that. So other than that, really good job. Really good job, Will.
Thank you.
Sorry for the spinning. We're back to me. That was almost a full 360 there, everyone. Anyway, thank you, Will, and thank you again, both committee members here. I have two questions I'd like to ask you, although kind of the first one has two parts, Will. So regarding the AER competency, which is assessment, evaluation, and research, what are the differences between qualitative and quantitative data? And talk about the benefits or limitations of each of those two.
So qualitative data, like we're getting more open-ended responses, questions, surveys from individuals and other people. With quantitative data, you're getting just a lot more numbers from a lot of graphs, other research, more scientific data, and especially with the limitations with qualitative data, it's that it's hard to come with your most open-ended responses because you can get a variety of opinions from other people. An advantage I see with qualitative data is that you can hear responses and create a lot of more open coding opportunities into creating new programs, research, and assessment opportunities because you can see interest that students have based on the responses and take action from that. With quantitative data, the limitation is that you can't really tell a story, and you have to make it alive. And one of my colleagues from APSE, which is the Association Supporting People Employment First, Dr. Julie Christensen, who's their current executive director, told me about how you have to create this data into a story, and it has to tell a story, and it's a hard thing with the limit when you're using quantitative data.
The second question, Will, as we think about the student affairs profession, what would you say are the values of the student affairs profession? Not you personally or not some specific department or office, but broadly, what are the values of student affairs?
You're here to basically serve the students, run effective programs, assessments, growing with understanding, with fighting for budget and administration opportunities, and looking at what is essential throughout the multiple aspect of how they can live, learn, and lead, and as well as looking at wellness opportunities, enhancing other opportunities outside of the academic classroom to help students succeed from when they first arrive on the college campus, as they grow once they graduate into the professional opportunity, with learning how to advocate for yourself, with learning how to network and be an activist is essential and important.
So that kind of wraps up my questions and those of the committee members here. I think we probably have time for maybe one question. If we can do that in chat, unless it's one of our two other people in the room. But if someone would like to type a question in chat, we have a moment we can do that. Or if not, sure. Carol Silva-Olaf, who's our Director of International Student Services.
Will knows, obviously, that my passion is also accessibility services and access, because that was a previous life of mine in teaching after physical education. And working in an international area, there are a lot of the same components that you need in regards to working with different diverse populations. And I am confident whatever road you choose, Will, you have those transferable skills that will guide you to do great things. So that's
Thank
just
you.
Okay, well, I'm not seeing any questions in chat. So what we'll do is wrap up our, Marguerite asked, Will, are you going to, what are you going to do to improve accessibility?
I think one of the things that I have learned during this time at Fort Hays State University was understanding more aspects of disability, not just the learning component of learning disabilities. Understanding which my colleague Dr. Patricia Levy has told me more is that anybody can acquire a disability at any point in your lifetime, as well as understanding that mental health is more important as a disability. And the one step with this that I have learned from looking at the research of disability studies scholar and special education scholar, Dr. Justin Friedman, when he was a graduate PhD student at Syracuse University, created this idea of going beyond compliance, which is my job, to go above and beyond what the ADA and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and ensure that our accommodations are more customized, and looking at how does everyone's access needs are being met. That's what I need to do, understanding that there's barriers in our environment, and what can we do to ensure that everyone gets the access and support to services that they need.
All right, for the sake of time, we're going to need to wrap up and kind of go into deliberation phase. Will, perhaps you can reach out directly to the
Sure.
individual there about their question. But other than that, thank you everyone who's joined. This is quite a good group. We've got 24 connected on Zoom plus 6 in the room. So give or take 30 people. Well, 29, I guess, because I'm one of those on both. But other than that, thank you all for joining, and congratulations to Will on doing a great job for our presentation here today.
Thank you all.
All right, and I'm going to close the Zoom room now. Thank you.